The cold wind howled through the French countryside as a thin, ragged boy trudged along the dirt road, his stomach empty, his feet blistered. He had no home, no family to turn to, and nowhere to go, only the weight of his dreams pushing him forward. At just 13 years old, Louis had lost everything, but he wasn't going to let the world break him. He had heard whispers of a great city, a place where fortunes were made, where people weren't defined by where they came from, but by what they could create. Paris. It was more than 300 miles away, an impossible journey for someone with nothing, but Louis didn't care. He would walk every step if he had to. Before we jump back into the story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow we've got another amazing story coming your way. Each night, he slept beneath the open sky, his body aching from the road. He scavenged for food, worked for scraps, and fought against exhaustion. The world was not kind to boys like him. There were dangers everywhere, thieves lurking in the shadows, strangers who looked at him with contempt, and the endless gnawing hunger that never left his side. But with every mile, he reminded himself, this is not where my story ends. When he finally reached Paris, it wasn't the city of dreams he had imagined. The streets reeked of filth, the poor were everywhere, and survival was a daily battle. But Louis was not afraid of hardship. He had lived through worse. He found work as an apprentice to a boxmaker and packer, a craft that most people overlooked. But to Louis, it was an art. He studied every stitch, every fold, and every detail of the fine wooden trunks and leather cases. He learned the secrets of precision, the importance of durability, and most importantly, the desires of the wealthy. They didn't just need boxes, they needed elegance, craftsmanship, and something that spoke of their status. Years passed, and Louis became a master at his craft. His reputation grew, and whispers of his skill reached the ears of Parisian elite. One day, a woman in a silk gown swept into the shop, her presence commanding the attention of everyone around her. She was no ordinary customer. She was Empress Eugenie, wife of Napoleon III. She had heard of Louis, of his skill, and she needed someone she could trust with her most delicate possessions. This was his chance, the moment he had been waiting for. One mistake, and he would be just another nameless worker. But if he succeeded, he could change his life forever. Louis took a deep breath, steadying his hands. He knew the world had tried to crush him, that every step of his journey had been a battle. But as he looked at the Empress, he wasn't that homeless boy anymore. He was an artist, a creator. He was about to show the world what he could do. And so, with one daring decision, the legacy of Louis Vuitton was set in motion. But how did a poor apprentice go from crafting trunks to building an empire? That's where the real story begins. Louis ran his fingers over the smooth leather, the scent of polished wood filling his lungs. He had spent years perfecting his craft, but this was different. The Empress of France had come to him. His mind raced as he imagined the endless possibilities. If he could impress her, he wouldn't just be a skilled box maker. He would be the box maker, the name on the lips of every noble in Paris. But failure was not an option. The Empress wasn't just any client. She was a woman of power, used to the finest things in life. She wanted a trunk that was not only beautiful but practical, something elegant yet strong, fit for a queen's travels. In that moment, Louis saw an opportunity no one else had. Luggage didn't have to be just functional. It could be a symbol of status, an extension of a person's style. He worked tirelessly, pouring everything into the design. Most trunks were dome-shaped, meant to keep water from pooling on top during travel, but Louis had a different vision. He designed a flat-top trunk, something stackable, something efficient. He chose lightweight yet durable materials, covered it in gray canvas to resist moisture, and reinforced every corner with metal. It was unlike anything Paris had seen before. When he finally presented his creation to the Empress, his heart pounded in his chest. Would she see the brilliance in his work? Or would he be dismissed, just another craftsman lost in the city's endless sea of workers? Eugenie ran her fingers over the surface, testing the strength of the design. Her expression remained unreadable. Silence stretched between them. Then, finally, she smiled. "This," she said, "is perfection." Louis exhaled, barely able to believe it. He had done it. With that single moment of approval, his life changed. Word spread like wildfire. Nobles, aristocrats, and wealthy travelers all wanted the young artisan's trunks. Orders poured in, and Louis knew he couldn't stay an apprentice forever. It was time to take the next step. With the little savings he had, he opened his own workshop in Paris. It wasn't grand, just a modest space, but it was his. He worked day and night, creating each piece with the same precision and passion that had caught the Empress's eye. His flat-topped trunks became the must-have item among the elite, and soon his name alone carried weight. But success was never simple. The more he grew, the more enemies he made. Rivals watched him with envy, their own businesses suffering as his flourished. They whispered that he was just a lucky peasant, that he didn't belong among the wealthy. Some even tried to steal his designs, selling cheap imitations of his work. Louis refused to let them win. He knew he had to evolve, to stay ahead. But how? His mind raced with ideas, but the pressure was suffocating. One wrong move and everything he had built could crumble. And then, just as his success reached new heights, disaster struck. Louis had fought for everything he had. Every stitch, every design, every late night spent in his workshop was a testament to his resilience. But success had a price, and he was about to pay it. One morning, as he stepped into his shop, the scent of burning wood filled the air. His heart pounded as he rushed inside, only to be met with a devastating sight: smoke curling from the charred remains of his workshop. The walls, once lined with his handcrafted trunks, were blackened, his tools, his materials, his life's work reduced to ash. Neighbors gathered outside, whispering among themselves. Some shook their heads in pity, others avoided his gaze. But Louis wasn't thinking about them. He was thinking about the enemies he had made. He had seen the jealous looks, heard the murmurs of competition. Rivals who had once dismissed him as a mere apprentice now saw him as a threat. Had one of them done this? Or was this just a cruel twist of fate? Either way, the message was clear. His success wasn't welcome. For the first time in years, doubt crept in. He had nothing left. Not a shop, not a single trunk, not even a space to start over. Would he become that homeless boy again, lost and forgotten? But Louis was not that boy anymore. He refused to be. With nothing but the clothes on his back, he knocked on the door of an old friend, Gabriel, a fellow craftsman who had started as an apprentice alongside him years ago. Gabriel welcomed him in without hesitation, offering him a corner of his small shop to work in. It wasn't much, just a tiny space with barely enough room for a workbench, but it was enough. And so Louis began again. Word spread quickly about the fire, and to his surprise, his customers didn't abandon him. The Empress herself sent word, offering her support. Nobles placed orders despite knowing the wait would be long. His rivals had tried to ruin him, but they had only made him stronger. Determined to rise from the ashes, Louis made a bold decision. If he was going to rebuild, he wouldn't just restore what he had lost, he would reinvent it. He began experimenting with new designs, looking beyond what had already been done. Instead of using the gray canvas that had made his trunks famous, he developed a more distinctive, luxurious material. He wanted his work to be unmistakable, something that no one could copy. At the same time, something else weighed on his mind. The world was changing. Travel was evolving, and with it, the needs of his customers. The wealthy no longer traveled just by carriage. They were beginning to cross oceans, boarding steamships that carried them across the world. They needed luggage that was not only stylish, but built for adventure. That's when Louis had an idea, one that would change everything. But he had no way of knowing that his biggest challenge was yet to come. Louis knew that if he wanted to survive, he couldn't just rebuild. He had to evolve. The world of travel was expanding faster than ever. Trains crisscrossed Europe, steamships carried the elite to faraway continents, and for the first time, people were traveling in ways never seen before. But their luggage? It hadn't kept up. Heavy, outdated, and impractical, the traditional travel trunks were more of a burden than a convenience. Louis saw the future before anyone else did. If travelers were moving differently, then their luggage needed to move with them. That was his opportunity. In his tiny borrowed workspace, he sketched new designs late into the night. He refined his signature flat-top trunk, reinforcing its structure, perfecting its balance of beauty and durability. But it wasn't enough. His rivals had already tried to destroy him once. If he wanted to rise above them, he needed something no one could replicate. That's when he created the try-on canvas. Unlike anything before it, the lightweight yet sturdy material set his trunks apart, making them instantly recognizable. It was the first step in what he hoped would be his greatest comeback. But just as he was ready to relaunch his business, another problem emerged, one he hadn't anticipated. His rivals weren't done with him. The fire hadn't been enough. Now, counterfeit versions of his designs began appearing in Paris, made with cheaper materials, sold at a fraction of the cost. He watched helplessly as imitations flooded the market, each one tarnishing the reputation he had fought so hard to build. Customers started questioning if what they were buying was really a Louis Vuitton trunk or just another fake. Louis couldn't let this happen. Fueled by frustration, he took a drastic step, one that would define his legacy forever. He needed to create something so unique, so impossible to copy, that his work would be untouchable. He experimented tirelessly, pushing his designs further, and then, in a stroke of brilliance, he introduced a new patterned canvas, one that would later become one of the most famous designs in the world. It was elegant, sophisticated, and most importantly, unmistakable. No imitation could match its craftsmanship. But even as he fought back against his enemies, the pressure mounted. His small borrowed space wasn't enough anymore. If he wanted to take the next step, he needed something bigger, his own workshop, his own team. And so, in 1859, Louis made the biggest gamble of his life. He left Paris. He purchased land in Asnières, just outside the city, and built a workshop of his own. It was a bold move, one that required every last coin he had. If it failed, there would be no second chance. He was risking everything. And then, just as he was ready to take his next step, disaster struck again. Something was coming that no amount of innovation could stop, something that threatened not only his business, but his very survival. Just when Louis thought he had reclaimed control over his fate, the world shifted beneath him once again. War. In 1870, France was plunged into chaos as the Franco-Prussian War erupted, sending shockwaves through the country. Paris fell under siege, food grew scarce, and businesses shut their doors. Even the wealthiest families, the very ones who had fueled Louis's success, fled the city or fell into ruin. His once loyal customers no longer cared about luxury trunks. They were struggling just to survive. And then came the moment that nearly broke him. One cold morning, a group of soldiers stormed through Asnières, seizing supplies, shutting down businesses, and recruiting able-bodied men to fight. Louis, now in his late 40s, was spared from battle, but his workshop was not. Materials were taken, workers disappeared, and production came to a grinding halt. He watched helplessly as his dream, his life's work, was once again slipping from his grasp. But Louis had learned long ago that when the world turns against you, you adapt. With no way to continue making trunks, he turned his skills to survival. He crafted whatever the people needed: wooden carts, storage boxes, anything that could be bartered or sold. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept food on his table. He refused to let war destroy him the way poverty once had. Months passed, and when the war finally ended, France was in ruins. The streets of Paris were littered with broken buildings, businesses had crumbled, and the aristocracy that had once ruled over fashion and luxury had all but vanished. Many of Louis's competitors had been wiped out entirely, but not him. As the city tried to rebuild, something unexpected happened. People began to travel again. Exiled nobles returned, merchants resumed their business, and the world craved a return to elegance. But they weren't just looking for luxury anymore. They wanted resilience, strength, craftsmanship that could withstand anything. And Louis was ready to give it to them. He returned to his workshop. But this time, he wasn't just making trunks. He was building a legacy. He introduced a new version of his designs, stronger and more refined than ever before. He streamlined production, hired back his workers, and ensured that every trunk that left his workshop bore the unmistakable mark of his craftsmanship. Then, in his boldest move yet, he created a new signature, a revolutionary pattern to protect against counterfeits once and for all. It was unlike anything the world had seen before, a design that would later become one of the most recognizable in fashion history. But just as Louis was rising once again, life had one more challenge in store for him, one that no amount of innovation or resilience could prepare him for. The clock was ticking, and time was no longer on his side. Louis had spent his entire life fighting against poverty, against rivals, against disaster, and each time he had risen stronger than before. But this time, the battle was one he couldn't win. Time was running out. Years of relentless work had taken their toll on his body. His hands, once steady and precise, had begun to tremble. Fatigue settled into his bones, and the fire that had burned within him for so long was beginning to flicker. He knew he couldn't go on forever. But there was one thing left to do. His business had survived war, counterfeits, and near destruction. But if it was going to live beyond him, he needed someone who could carry his legacy forward. He turned to the only person he trusted, his son, Georges. Georges had grown up watching his father create something out of nothing. He had seen the sacrifices, the struggles, and the triumphs. But the world was changing again, and Louis knew his son would need to do more than just maintain what he had built. He would have to take it further. In his final years, Louis worked closely with Georges, passing down every lesson, every secret of his craft. Together, they developed something that would cement the brand's future, a new pattern, the iconic LV monogram, a final stroke of genius designed to make their work unmistakable, untouchable. But just as this new era was about to begin, Louis' body finally gave in. In 1892, he passed away, leaving behind not just a name, but an empire in the making. Most men's stories end with their death, but Louis' story didn't. George took everything his father had built and transformed it into something even greater. He expanded the business beyond France, taking it to new heights his father had only dreamed of. The LV monogram became a global symbol of prestige, and the trunks, once made for aristocrats, found their way into the hands of world travelers, celebrities, and visionaries. The boy who had once been homeless, wandering the roads of France with nothing, had built something timeless. His name didn't just survive, it became legendary, and the world would never forget it. Louis Vuitton's story didn't end with his passing. It was just the beginning of something far greater than even he could have imagined. His journey from a homeless boy to a master craftsman had set the foundation for a legacy that would outlive him by centuries. But at the heart of it all, it wasn't just about trunks, travel, or luxury. It was about resilience, reinvention, the belief that no matter where you come from, you have the power to shape your own destiny. After Louis' death, George Vuitton took the reins with the same determination his father had instilled in him. But the world was changing fast. Travel was no longer just for the elite. It was becoming a way of life. Steamships carried explorers across oceans, and railroads stretched across continents. With these new opportunities came new challenges, but George had learned from the best. When the world changes, you change with it. Under his leadership, the Louis Vuitton brand expanded beyond Paris, reaching customers across Europe and beyond. The revolutionary LV monogram, introduced to combat counterfeits, became more than just a way to protect their designs. It became a symbol of craftsmanship, elegance, and status. What started as a small workshop outside Paris was now growing into a global empire. And yet, through all the success, the heart of the company remained unchanged. Every trunk, every design, every stitch still carried the same principles Louis had built his life on: quality, innovation, and an unshakable commitment to perfection. Looking back, it's almost impossible to believe that one of the most iconic names in fashion and luxury started with a penniless boy walking miles in search of a better life. Louis Vuitton's story is more than just a tale of success. It's proof that even in the face of hardship, greatness is possible. His legacy isn't just in the trunks he crafted or the empire he built. It's in every person who dares to dream beyond their circumstances, every entrepreneur who refuses to give up, every artist who turns struggle into creation. And maybe that's the real lesson in Louis Vuitton's story. It's not about being born into wealth or privilege. It's about perseverance, reinventing yourself when the world pushes you down, creating something so unique, so unmistakable, that it stands the test of time. Today, the name Louis Vuitton is recognized across the globe. It represents luxury, innovation, and artistry. But behind the brand, behind the prestige, there will always be the story of a boy who had nothing and built everything. A story of a homeless child who changed the world, one trunk at a time. Louis Vuitton's story is one of resilience, reinvention, and unstoppable ambition. Born into poverty, he left home as a young boy, walking hundreds of miles to Paris in search of a better life. Starting as an apprentice, he mastered the art of crafting luxury trunks, earning the favor of French royalty. But success brought enemies. His workshop was burned down, his designs were copied, and war nearly destroyed everything he built. Instead of giving up, Louis innovated. He revolutionized travel with lighter, more durable luggage and introduced a unique design to protect his work from counterfeits. Even after his passing, his son Georges carried the vision forward, expanding the brand into a global empire. Today, Louis Vuitton isn't just a name, it's a symbol of excellence. His journey proves that no matter where you start, determination and creativity can turn hardship into a lasting legacy.